What if everything you thought you knew about Bishop Eddie Long's final days was a lie? Behind the pulpit, behind the fame, behind the millions of followers, was a man isolated, abandoned, and dying in silence. Once one of the most powerful voices in the church, Bishop Long didn't pass surrounded by love or the ministry he built, but in a heartbreaking silence that no one saw coming. Now, his wife Vanessa is finally speaking out. And what she reveals isn't just painful, it's explosive. From betrayal and heartbreak to secrets buried deep within the walls of New Birth Missionary Baptist Church, this is the story they tried to hide. Until now. Stay with us, because what you're about to hear about Bishop Eddie Long's final moments will leave you absolutely speechless. He was once hailed as a spiritual titan, a man of thunderous sermons, larger-than-life influence, and the shepherd of one of America's most powerful megachurches. But while the world watched him command pulpits and headlines, a darker, far more personal story was unfolding behind the scenes, one drenched in silence, sorrow, and soul-deep isolation. Bishop Long didn't pass surrounded by praise or prayers. Instead, his final days were marked by a haunting quiet, a sense of betrayal, abandonment, and emotional exile that no one in the public saw coming. Now, for the first time since his death, his wife Vanessa Long is breaking that silence. Not through polished press releases or staged interviews, but through an unfiltered private moment that has surfaced, shaking the very foundation of his legacy. What she reveals about the man behind the ministry, is something no one expected. And what Vanessa Long revealed, changes everything. In a voice heavy with pain and long-silenced truth, she claims Bishop Eddie Long spent his final days not surrounded by faith, but suffocated by abandonment. The same people who once shouted his praises from the pulpit, the leaders who stood behind him in public, were nowhere to be found when he needed them most. Isolated, crushed beneath the weight of scandal, illness, and betrayal, Bishop Long's final moments were a far cry from the image the world was sold. But the question that now haunts everyone is, why? Why did the church that once crowned him their king turn its back? Why did his inner circle, once so loyal, disappear into silence? And more disturbingly, what did Vanessa Long really know all along, and why did she choose to stay silent for so many years? In this video, we uncover the chilling details from Bishop Long's final weeks, emotional revelations from Vanessa, the secret health crisis that was hidden from the public, the devastating fallout from explosive allegations, and the truth about the power structure he left behind. What really happened in those final days? What was swept under the rug, and why? By the time this story ends, you won't just be stunned, you'll be rethinking everything you ever believed about one of the most controversial and powerful men in modern church history. Bishop Eddie Long was once safe from harm. He was powerful, charismatic, and had a large following. For a while, more than 25,000 people went to the New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Lithonia, Georgia. He was more than just a teacher, he made kings. People in power, famous people, and sports all asked for his blessing. His followers saw him as a prophet for our time. But behind the huge sermons and church walls, something very disturbing was happening. There were rumors at first. Word began to spread quickly in 2016 that Bishop Long was not feeling well. There were pictures of the man who used to be known for his bold clothes and strong body that showed he had lost a lot of weight. Fans were shocked. The followers were lost. To drown out the noise, he said he was just starting a new raw vegan diet and trying to live a better life. Still, people who were there knew that wasn't the whole story. In secret, Bishop Long was fighting a very bad type of cancer. Still, he chose to suffer alone. People who know the family say that he didn't want to look weak. He didn't want sympathy. He also didn't want his enemies, both inside and outside the church, to use his sickness against him. But making that choice cost something. Later, Vanessa Long said that as his health got worse, many of his close friends stopped coming to see him. People who used to sit in the front row with their hands raised in praise were now too busy to answer the phone. Friends became less close. It is said that some church staff started getting ready for the next chapter before the end of his last chapter. Can you picture a man who used to lead thousands of people being locked up in his house, ignored, and facing a battle he didn't ask for? Vanessa's statement that it seemed like people were embarrassed of him was one of the most sad parts. Or perhaps they didn't want to be linked to his fall. I was there, though. He cried in front of me. He prayed, I saw. I could see how deeply alone he felt. That wasn't in the headlines or the press release, because the truth is that the church carefully created the story they told the public, but the truth was much darker. They really don't want you to know this. Several sources say that there were secret meetings going on even in Noah's close group that Eddie Long didn't know about. Talks about who will lead the church, how to pay for it, and how it looks. As Eddie fought for his life, someone close to the group said they were making plans for his future. Take that in. The man who built the empire was tired and weak, and his country was already being broken up. But that wasn't the end of the pain. We need to talk about the elephant in the shelter in order to understand why Bishop Eddie Long spent his last days alone. The claims of sexual misbehavior that shook not only his ministry but also the black church community as a whole. At the end of 2010, 4 young men sued Bishop Long, saying that he used his divine power to force them into sexual relationships. These men had been to church before. People who looked up to them were like spiritual sons or daughters. They said he spoiled them with gifts, trips, and promises of being their mentor, but behind closed doors, he was reportedly manipulating them. The news came out like a storm. His long, clean reputation, his power, and his influence were all shook in an instant. The story gets even worse from here on out. Instead of being clear, there was silence. Bishop Long quietly settled the cases in 2011 instead of going to court. There was no public apology or admission of guilt. There were only sealed papers and more questions than answers. The terms of the settlement are still secret, but the damage to his image could not be fixed. His work changed a lot in the years after that. Attendance went down. National preachers stayed away from each other. Fewer people went out in public. Even among those who stayed, there was a sense of unease, a quiet, painful break that couldn't be fixed by a lecture. Vanessa Long says that this was the start of him pulling away emotionally. He was hurt by the people he had helped build, she said. He was judged by everyone, even the people in his church. There was one thing that was certain, whether you believe the claims or not. It was over for the court of popular opinion. The man who was once praised as a prophetic preacher turned into a warning. Late-night shows made fun of him. Memes went around. He went from being the star to being spiritually alone. He kept speaking even though everything was going wrong. He kept coming back. He said over and over that he was still standing. But Vanessa now says that behind the scenes, he was breaking down. Eddie didn't want to die that way, she said. He did not want shame to be the end of his story. People should remember the work he did and the people he helped. But every time his name came up, it was always because of what he was accused of, never because of what he had done. On top of her failing health from the cancer, that mental weight became too much to bear. And now comes the scary part. His victims went on with their lives and mostly stayed out of the public eye, but Bishop Long stayed frozen in public shame. The scandal still casts a shadow over his lectures, his charity work, and the legacy he worked so hard to protect. Wendy knew more, though. She says some information was kept from the press. Things that might have made people see the man behind the throne differently. She says things were hidden to keep the church, the brand, and the ministry business safe. Now we can move on to the next part of the story. While Bishop Long fought for forgiveness and healing, there was another battle going on behind the scenes. It involved money, silence, and the ultimate betrayal by the people he trusted the most. The trust that existed in the walls of New Birth Missionary Baptist Church fell apart as Bishop Eddie Long's health got worse. Everything still looked clean from the outside. As normal, the lights stayed on, the sermons went on, and the congregation gathered. But a quiet reorganization was already going on behind closed doors. Vanessa Long says her husband knew about it too. He just didn't think it would happen so quickly and so badly. People close to the family said that when Bishop Long got too weak to lead services regularly, powerful church leaders began to make moves that left him out completely. One former employee who did not want to be named said that talks were going on without his knowledge. It was decided on money, who would be promoted, and even what the new spiritual direction would be while Bishop Long was still alive, fighting, and officially in charge. That kind of betrayal hurts more than any news from the outside. Imagine being the creator of one of the biggest black churches in the U.S. You built it from the ground up and saw it through storms and scandals. Then, when you're at your weakest, you find out that the people you helped are planning to replace you. This wasn't just a guess either. Vanessa Long recently said that during her husband's last few months, she found records of changing financial goals, private board meetings, and unofficial succession planning that he had not agreed to. There was more to it than just picking a replacement. It was about managing the assets and the message, but most importantly, it was about saving the church's reputation before Bishop Long's death was made public. Now this is where things get cool. Several sources say that the people in charge were worried that if Bishop Long died too quickly, it would lead to chaos and financial problems. The media would look more closely again, tithes would drop, and members might leave. Instead of getting ready for him to get better, some were already planning his death. Vanessa had to carry that load in silence while she grieved with her husband and watched him die. In an interview, she said, "It was like seeing a man slowly fade away. He died for the church, not just this world." Take that in. Bishop Long was not only fighting a disease that would kill him, but he was also seeing his life's work being changed while he was still alive. Vanessa says it's even worse that no one came to say goodbye. She also says that many of the church elders stopped calling him in his last few weeks. Staff members became less close. There were no signs of friends from the national ministry circuit. Even the people he had trained to be leaders stayed away from him. Why? Because being linked to a disgraced and dying leader no longer fit with their public roles, platforms, or image. It was neglect that looked like it was being polite. It's not just about one man either. This story is meant to show what can happen when the machinery of megachurch service gets too big for the person who built it. Vanessa said that they remembered him in public but erased him behind closed doors. Time was going by very quickly as the days turned into hours. Bishop Eddie Long used to be a powerful figure in pulpits all over the United States. Now, he was sitting still at home, his body weak and his voice weak. The person who said, "I'm still standing," was barely holding on. Vanessa Long was with him all day and night. She wasn't just his wife. Her job was to watch over him, care for him, and protect him from a world that had turned its back on him. In her most recent emotional speech, Vanessa told something that even Bishop Long's closest friends were shocked by. "I almost left at one point, not just him, but everything. From serving, from hurting, and from deception. I had doubts about everything. Was it all for nothing?" Just that one quote broke the idea that she had been loyal and kept quiet. There was more to the truth. She stayed because he didn't have anyone else. Bishop Long made one last request to Vanessa as he was dying. His body could no longer fight and his voice could barely whisper. "They shouldn't change my story." He told her that. Not "I love you. Do not look after the kids." It wasn't about the money, the house, or the name in his last words. They were about his truth, the part of his life that wouldn't be cleaned up for church publicity or hidden under scandal. Vanessa says that she made up her mind at that very moment. She wasn't going to cry alone. She was going to talk eventually, but she didn't. Years went by. The church went on with its work. People who didn't like him stayed away. Even his defenders grew quiet until now. Vanessa found out that she had stored journal entries, sanatorium notes, or even voice memos from Bishop Long's very last weeks, no longer for scandal, no longer for sympathy, however, due to the fact he asked her to record what nobody else would trust. He desired humans to recognize he changed into broken, but no longer bitter, vulnerable, however not depraved. And greater than anything, he desired human beings to understand. He changed into sorry. Wait, sorry. It really is the part the church never heard. Vanessa didn't intricate completely, but she hinted that Eddie Long struggled privately with guilt, not just about the accusations, however, about how a ways the ministry had drifted from its roots. He told me as soon as, Vanessa shared, I built a residence for God. And somewhere along the manner, I stopped checking who became residing in it. That confession shook Vanessa to her core. It wasn't pretty much sin or scandal. It was approximately the conclusion that someplace somehow the assignment were given lost in the noise and the price became his peace and perhaps his life. Ultimately, she made a quiet promise. No longer to clear his call, however, to inform the complete reality, the full photograph, now not the only the headlines painted, no longer the only the church spun, however, the story of a deeply flawed guy who observed a few shape of redemption in his final breaths. He did not want to be remembered as a monster, she said. He desired to be remembered as a person who tousled, who broke down, but who also tried in the long run to make things proper. Bishop Eddie Langthy's adventure did not lead to a thunderous very last sermon or a packed Colosseum packed with devoted followers. It resulted in silence. No more roaring crowds. No greater crimson carpets at Gospel Award indicates. No extra headlines celebrating his today's church undertaking. Rather, it became a dimly lit room, a grieving spouse, and a person clinging to his last breath, whispering now not sermons, but regrets. And that's what makes this story so haunting and so important. Due to the fact what we've uncovered right here is more than only a scandal or a fall from grace. It is a raw, unfiltered observe what occurs when celeb, religion, energy, and silence collide. We've visible how the human beings closest to you, the ones you lifted, mentored, hired, and relied on, can shrink back whilst the cameras stop rolling. We've got visible how the organization of church can defend itself, even on the fee of burying the very people who constructed it. We've visible espouse, Vanessa Langthy, deliver the burden of a person's legacy, no longer for fame or applause, however, because she knew if she failed to inform the entire tale, no person else would. And in that silence, she became the very last voice of fact. Whether or not you believe Bishop Eddie Long was guilty, misunderstood, or each, there may be no denying that his very last days were marked via isolation, emotional pain, and a determined hope for redemption. His death words, "Do not allow them to rewrite my story," aren't pretty much one man. They are a caution to every megachurch that puts logo over truth. To each ministry that forgets its task in pursuit of systems. To each believer who forgets that pastors are human beings, human, prone, and fallacious. So, what can we study from Bishop Langthy's final bankruptcy? Here's the fact. If the church does not discover ways to face its flaws, to embody accountability, and to certainly guard the hearts of those interior it, then Eddie Langthy's tale might not be the ultimate of its type. It'll just be the latest in a growing listing of leaders who upward push too fast, fall too difficult, and die feeling forgotten.